Now is Republican Congressman Tom Cole of Oklahoma, who served appropriations and budget committees. Congressman, let's start with Alex Azar, former pharmaceutical company executive, former member of the Bush administration. We know he's a critic of Obamacare. Do you think he's the right pick?
Well, he certainly seems to be an excellent pick. I haven't had a chance to meet him. I actually chair the subcommittee that funds Health and Human Services, so I'm sure I'll have that opportunity shortly, certainly after he's confirmed. But by everything I can see, the credentials are excellent. He's clearly got experience with the department. He has professional knowledge in an area that's critical, having headed a pharmaceutical company. So looks to me like a very good pick by the president.
So I guess you might be right. He's either really well qualified or he's entirely the wrong guy, given that even the president has admitted that pharmaceuticals, they're the biggest lobbyers this year in Washington. They're the opaque piece of the puzzle when you're looking at health care. So one could say, hey, look, he knows the inside of the system. Maybe he's the best guy to solve it. Or is this the swamp getting back in again? What do you think?
Well, you know, years ago, former President Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, actually chose Joseph Kennedy to head up the Securities and Exchange Commission for exactly that reason. He'd been pretty shrewd in the stock market, knew all the tricks, and said, the president at that time said, I think he's a guy that'll make sure it doesn't happen again, and that turned out to be an excellent appointment. So, again, you have to, the Senate will go through, they'll look at his credentials, and we'll get there, but it looks to me like he's very, very well qualified and experienced.
Well, then, on that same note, the president has, as the new acting head of the IRS, a lawyer who's made a career of working with companies who set up illegal tax avoidance shelters. And we know that Robert Mercer, who just stepped down from running Renaissance Technology, his hedge fund is in dispute with the IRS to the tune of $7 billion in unpaid taxes. So there's a lot of concern when you make a choice like this, like President Trump's choice for the new acting head of the IRS, has a specialty in avoiding paying taxes and protecting those companies who do so.
Well, I'm not familiar with that particular choice. I don't interact with the IRS much. And again, we have a confirmation process where those very points can be made. But I don't think you can automatically exclude people simply because they have expertise in an area. Actually, quite often you want that expertise. So, but whoever the lawyer is, he was working for his clients. I assume he did so in good faith and you know, lived up to his fiduciary obligation to the people that were paying him. But you go to work for the government of the United States, we're the people that are paying you. And your client changes, so to speak, and you take an oath and you have an obligation to do the right thing. So, again, he'll go through the fire of a Senate hearing. If he's the right person, we'll see. But I'm not going to disqualify people because they have an expertise in the area that we're asking them to serve in.
Congressman, let's talk a little about this topic we were just discussing before you came on. Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore. We're hearing another accuser is coming forward today. We heard Mitch McConnell say he believes the woman. We heard the governor of Alabama saying, Kay Ivey saying she has no reason to doubt the accusations. What do you think the right thing is to do, both for Roy Moore and for Republicans in general?
Well, let me preface, I'm not from Alabama. I don't have a vote or a voice there. But I find these stories extremely troubling. And frankly, with mounting credibility. And I find the fact that Mr. Moore, on 2 different occasions, had to give up or was effectively removed from the highest judicial office in Alabama, disturbing as well. So I think in this case, the best thing to do would be for him to step aside. This race isn't about the issues anymore. It really is now a referendum on a single individual, and that's regrettable. We've got some big issues in front of us, and that's an important seat. And balanced United States Senate. So, you know, as a pretty good party guy, I would say let's step down and give the Republican Party the best opportunity it has to win. I don't think this debate is particularly helpful in that regard.
Congressman, I want to talk about the president and his trip to Asia. His overwhelming message has been America first, America first. But he's taking some heat now for suggesting that he believed Vladimir Putin with regard to Putin not being involved in any meddling in the election. That doesn't sound like America first. It sounds like Russia first.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, and frankly,
so
I think the
president's
walked those. Well, first of all, I don't have any doubt that the Russians meddled in our elections. Now, I also think countries do that on a pretty routine basis. This isn't the first time. The means are new. And frankly, President Obama went to Great Britain and literally told them they were going to the back of the line if they passed Brexit. That's meddling in an election big time. So let's not, hyperventilate over this. But in the end, they did try to meddle in our election. The two things I'm certain of is, one, we've seen no evidence so far, despite multiple investigations of any collusion, and I don't think it had any impact in the outcome. Doesn't mean we shouldn't take it seriously. Doesn't mean we shouldn't send a message.
Whether or not it had impact in the outcome, we can put that aside. Do you believe that President Trump believes that Russia tried to meddle in our election?
Well, he said that he accepted the conclusions of his intelligence agencies, and they're pretty unanimous that they did. So in that situation, I assume that he does. I think sometimes he worries that this sort of meddling will somehow delegitimize his presidency or evidence of this. I don't think that's the case, because I don't think this was successful. But I think you need to recognize when your adversaries, and they are an adversary of the United States, not an ally, are doing, committing mischief, you're prepared to deal with it. So, again, I would like to work with the Russians as well in Syria and Ukraine and other. I don't think you need to let it blow up the entire relation. There are parts of the world we have common interests. But in this case, I think there's no question that they tried. I think it did not succeed, and I think it's pretty embarrassing for them. But, at the end of the day, we need to, forewarned is forearmed. We need to be ready to deal with these kind of intrusions in our electoral process.
Congressman, I think you guys are going to want to vote on the tax overhaul bill by the end of the week. One of the things that we're trying to get to the bottom of is the advantage of cutting the corporate tax rate in a place where corporate profitability is very, very high, capital is available and very cheap. The New York Times reports this morning, we're talking about a 35% to 20% drop. In fact, most people are accepting of the fact that the effective tax rate that American corporations pay is about 18.1% or 18.6%, something like that. I've got that on the screen, 18.6. Here's the issue. The New York Times points out that in 1967, corporate tax revenue in the United States made up 4% of gross domestic product, right? Made 4% of GDP. Last year, it made up less than 2% of GDP. So corporate tax as a proportion of our GDP has gone down by 50%. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I look at where businesses are going, and we've got quite a few businesses leaving the country because other countries are offering rates in the neighborhood of what we're talking about. That costs us jobs, that costs us productivity. That's not good for our economy. So I think we live in a world of competition. Our rates need to be competitive with our principal economic competitors. They're not right now, and you're seeing American businesses offshore. So I'm supportive of what we're trying to do. I think it will, you can look at both the market and I think the growth rate that we've had this year, and some of that has to do with anticipation of this. I think if you don't get it done, you're going to actually take a pretty serious hit, and I think you're going to deliver a pretty serious blow to the competitiveness of American industry.
Well, one thing that sticks out, the corporate tax rate is being cut, but the loopholes aren't being closed. The reason to cut the tax rate is because they go through all of these giant efforts to pay less taxes. If you just cut the rate but keep all the loopholes,
then it won't be 20%. It's going to be substantially lower than 20%.
I don't think we're going to see all the loopholes kept. That's not my understanding of what's happening. Now, to be fair, I'm not on Ways and Means. Well, look, I'm not on the relevant committee. You should talk to them. I know actually a couple of historic loopholes that benefit my state are being closed. Something called the Indian lands tax credit. So there are, particular areas that are taking a hit, and I just think that's the case. Let's wait and see where we end up. I mean, the Senate bill's different than the House bill. There's actually some things I like in the Senate bill that we don't have in the House bill, and vice versa. We'll move this thing out of here. The Senate will do the same. There'll be a conference. So we'll wait and see where we end up. But I think delivering real tax reform and, frankly, real tax relief to American workers and the middle class and the American business community are good things. I think they'll long-term produce growth and opportunity for the average American.
Representative Tom Cole, good to talk to you as always. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.